Today I want you to evaluate the equation for when x equals to 3. I want you to substitute it in each one of these equations right here. Go ahead and put me on pause while you solve for these. Substitute 3 in place of the x and come up with the answer. Now, look at your answers. Do your answers look like these? They should. And if they didn't, did you substitute the 3 in parentheses in place of the x right here? This is how you should have typed it into your calculator. And make sure that you substitute the 3 in place of the x and put parentheses around it. Because when you have a negative x right here, and when you substitute it into an equation with the square in it like these, it will give you a different answer if you do not do it, type it in correctly and put it in parentheses. Now, look at this right here. We're going to start looking and studying about quadratics, and there's quadratics everywhere you look at. So here's just just to name some of the famous ones that we have. So when we look at this right here, the arch in St. Louis right here, Missouri, right here, you see that this is a quadratic, and if you remember back from your integrated math 1 days, this right here is a negative parabola. It is facing down. Here is the Eiffel Tower in France. So when you look at this is also a negative parabola. It is facing down. Here's another, here's a roller coaster somewhere. This is a negative shape, and they do have some U-shapes which are facing up, which is a parabola. So there are positive and negative parabolas around the world. Think about the McDonald's, the golden arches, those are parabolas. The water fountain that you drink out of, the water that comes out of the water fountain goes up and then it comes back down. So that is a parabola, which is a quadratic. Quadratics are everywhere you look at. Now, we're going to be looking at identifying key features in graphs and tables. We're going to be looking at intervals where the function is increasing and decreasing. So this is right here is decreasing and increasing, decreasing. We're going to be looking at if these are positive or negative parabolas. We're going to be looking at the relative maximum and minimums in symmetries. You'll be sketching a graph of a quadratic function. And here's another famous landmark somewhere, I do not know where this is, that has parabolas right here, as you can see, all the way going through this building. So parabolas are everywhere. Quadratics are everywhere. Now, I want you to take your the 1.1 notes, the intro to quadratics, and start filling this out with me. When we're looking at standard forms, all quadratic equations are written in this form right here. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Make sure you write this down. And the a, b, and c are all numbers. So you have the coefficient of x squared, which is x. The coefficient of x is b. So we are particularly going to look at this right here, A and B, today. So this is the standard form of a quadratic equation right here. You must know that. Now, when we're graphing quadratics, it's going to be a parabola shape, which is a U shape. So here's another word that we also learn in Integrated Math 1. Now, look at these. These are two different types of parabolas right here. So you're going to use your graphing calculator to sketch the graph of this. So when I look at this, go to y equals and put in x squared plus 2x minus 5 and hit graph and then graph this. Do the same thing for y equals to negative x squared plus 3x plus 7. Put this in your graphing calculator, y1, and hit graph and graph what you see here. Put me on pause when you do so. Now, right here, you see here your parabola should look something similar to this, and as well as this one right here. So this is a positive parabola, so positive quadratic, and it is a positive parabola, so it's facing up. This one is a negative, so it is facing down. Now, if it's a positive parabola, it's going to face up. If it is a negative parabola, it's going to face down. Pause me while you finish writing this. Now you have the axis of symmetry. Axis of symmetry is a vertical line that divides the parabola into two equal parts. There is a formula that you must know that right here. x equals to negative b over 2a, you must know this. This is not written down on that formula sheet that you'll use at the end of the year on your EOC. So you must know x equals negative b over 2a. Now, you also have what we call a vertex, which is the turning point of a parabola. Think about if you're driving down the road and you make a U-turn. Where you make a U-turn, turn around, that's the vertex. Now, the vertex of a parabola, the lowest point is called the minimum. The highest point of a parabola is the maximum. And you have now, you're looking at, we're going to start solving and finding the axis of symmetry, the vertex, and we're going to sketch a parabola. So here's the steps that we're going to go through. So the first one you see, the first thing you're going to have to identify is your a and b. And if you do not see a coefficient right here in front of the x square, it is understood to be a 1. So the a is 1, the b is 8. I'm going to substitute it into those two numbers into this formula right here. And then when I put all this in the calculator at one time, it gives me x equals to negative 4. Now, once you get your x right here, take and substitute your x, which is a negative 4. Take this right here and substitute it in place of the x right here in the quadratic equation right here. Y equals x squared plus 8x plus 15. Make sure you put the negative 4 in parentheses, because if you don't, it will give you the wrong answer. Then take all of this at one time and put it in your graphing in your whatever calculator you're using, and it will give you the answer of y equals to negative 1. So now, when I look at this right here, the vertex is a negative 4, that's your x, and then the y is a negative 1. Now, since this is a positive parabola, it's going to face up, and it's going to look like this. You're going to draw a dotted line down the middle of the parabola right here, and that dotted line is called the axis of symmetry right here. This right here, where it crosses, cuts this in half, is your x equals to negative 4. Now, the lowest point of this parabola is the vertex is at a negative 4, negative 1. So if you're driving down the highway and then you're coming down the highway and you make a U-turn, where you make a U-turn and start turning, that is your vertex. So the vertex is right here at negative 4, negative 1. And this is, think about this as the center lane that's dividing this road in half. So here's the steps again. First thing we're going to do is identify a and b. Once you identify your a and b, second step you're going to do is find the axis of symmetry. You're going to use this formula right here, negative b over 2a. Once you have your axis of symmetry, which is x equals negative 4, then you're going to put the negative 4 in place of the x. Substitute it back in there. Make sure that you put it in parentheses. Put all of this at one time in the calculator, and your answer will be y equals to a negative 1. Now write your vertex as an ordered pair, negative 4, negative 1. So there's your x right here and your y. Now you're going to sketch this, and since it's a positive parabola, it's going to face up. Divide it in half by drawing a dotted line, which is your axis of symmetry. So this is x equals to a negative 4 right here, and then this point is at a negative 4, negative 1. Driving down the road, making a U-turn, and where you start turning, that is your axis of symmetry. Now, look at number 2. On number 2, the first thing we're going to do is identify a and b, substitute it in place, substitute it back into the axis of symmetry formula. And then once you come up with your axis of symmetry, substitute it back into the number 2, into place of the x. Make sure that you put the 5 in parentheses. The negative is not with the 5 right here. That's in front of the x. So put all of this at one time in the calculator, just like you see it. And your vertex, your y right here is 2. So write it as a ordered pair, and the vertex is at 5, 2. Sketch it, and since it's a negative parabola, it's going to face down, a negative quadratic. You draw your dotted line, and this line right here, this dotted line is x equals 5. Now, the highest point of this parabola, since it's a negative parabola, is going to face down. The highest point right here, the vertex, is at 5, 2. So if you're driving down the highway and you make a U-turn, where you start turning, that is your vertex. Now, number 3, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to identify your A and B, substitute it back into your formula, find your your x, which is x equals 2, substitute the 2 back in the x squared right here, in the x, and when you do, just type all of this at one time in the calculator, then your y is a -7. Now write your vertex as an ordered pair. So I look at this right here, here's my x and here's my y, so I know when I start making a U-turn in the middle of the road, it's going to be at 2, -7. Now my dotted line is going to be on x equals to 2. So it is a positive parabola, it faces up. Here's my dotted line, which is your axis of symmetry, which is at x equals to 2. And your vertex is 2, -7. This is the lowest point. This is the minimum value of the U-shape, the parabola. Now, look at number 4. On number 4, you're going to identify your A and B again, just like you did. And then you're going to substitute back into the formula, x equals -b over 2a. Get your answer, x equals -1. That's your axis of symmetry. So the dotted line will be x equals to a -1. Now, substitute the -1 back into the quadratic. Make sure that you, right here, put -1 inside parentheses and the 2 on the outside. And when you put all this at one time into the calculator, you'll come up with y equals to -5. Write it as a ordered pair, and you see it's a -1, -5. Draw your sketch. I see this is a positive quadratic, and so since it's a positive quadratic, it's going to face up, excuse me. And your x equals to a -1. Here is your axis of symmetry. The lowest point of this is at -1, -5. So just like before, you're driving down the highway, make a U-turn, and where you start making a U-turn, that point, that lowest point right here, is at a -1,5, and this is the center of your highway right here. And this is at x equals to a -1. Now, put me on pause, make sure that you have kept up with your notes. Make sure your notes look like these. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to try 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on your own. So put me on pause and go back, and I want you to finish filling out this. Okay, now you should have finished 5, 6, 7, and 8. And when you're looking at these, the first thing you're going to do is come up with your A and B, just like before. You're going to go through all these steps so that the x equals to a -2, substitute it back in, and your y is at 2. So your vertex is a -2, 2. And since this is a negative parabola, it's going to face down. So your graph should look like this. Your line of symmetry right here, your axis of symmetry, is at x equals to a -2. This is middle of the highway. And then your vertex right here is a -2, 2. This is where it starts turning around. You're making a U-turn in the middle of the road, and you start turning at -2, 2. Now, let's check your 6. So when we're looking at 6, you see that we have y equals to a -3x squared and minus 24x minus 42. So identify your A and B. And when you identify your A and B, this is what it should look like. So your x is -4. Now you should have already substituted all this back in. And when you did, your y equals to -6. And write it as, make sure that you have written this as an ordered pair. And when you do, you see that your turning point in the parabola will be at a -4, 6. And the axis of symmetry is at a -4. It is a negative parabola. It is facing down. And so here's the middle of the highway. You're driving down the middle of the highway, make a U-turn, and where you start turning is a -4, 6, and this is your vertex, which is a maximum value, the highest point of the parabola. Let's check your others, 7, 8, and 9. So when we check 7, 8, and 9, these are the values that you should have going through here. So I'm putting all these answers up here. Make sure that you check it, and your answer should look like each one of these. So double check it. Do your answers look like this? Were you able to find your axis of symmetry using this formula x equals to negative e over 2a? Were you able to substitute that in and come up with your axis of symmetry? Were you able to substitute it back in the quadratic equation right here and come up with your y in order to come up with your vertex, which is your x and y right here? Were you able to sketch it? If not, go back and study these notes. But all of these notes, I want you to glue into your composition interactive notebook, and so that you can refer back to it. So good luck on the rest of the assignments. Make sure that you're able to do this on the rest of your work. If not, go back and study these.